On that cool September morning, nothing foreshadowed trouble. The Pacific Ocean fully justified its name. Its surface was smooth as a mirror. The sun had just begun to rise above the horizon, tinting the sky with soft pink hues. James Warren, as usual, was preparing his equipment on the deck of the research vessel Sea Wanderer. His team, consisting of 5 experienced divers, methodically checked the gear. Sarah Chen, a marine biology specialist, was setting up the underwater camera. Mike Peterson, a former military diver, was checking the air tanks. Rachel O'Neill, a marine ecologist, was calibrating the water temperature and salinity. Thomas Rodriguez, a navigation specialist, was studying current maps on a tablet. James checked the weather forecast on his smartphone for the 100th time. The conditions were ideal for diving: light wind, good visibility, and calm seas. The captain of the dhow, vessel Old Sea Dog George McPherson, leisurely pulled himself up. The radios worked without interference, and the positioning systems showed accurate coordinates. Sarah took out her worn observation journal, preparing to record data about marine life. In these waters, sea lions, dolphins, and of course majestic humpback whales were often encountered. Just 15 minutes later, the first group of divers, James and Mike, descended into the water. The temperature was slightly lower than usual, but this did not stop the brave researchers. The visibility underwater turned out to be excellent, which greatly pleased the entire team. Sunlight penetrating the water created a play of light and shadow. They planned to survey a small coral reef located about a mile from the shore. This reef was part of their long-term project. Sarah Chen and Thomas remained on board, ready to support their colleagues at any moment. Sarah, observing the water's surface with binoculars, noticed unusual turbulence about 300 meters from the vessel. At first, she thought it was a typical waterspout from a humpback whale, but something about the movement seemed strange to her. She slowly reported this to Captain McPherson. The vessel moved towards the noticed movement, maintaining a safe distance. Rachel quickly retrieved a special hydrophone to record underwater sounds. A few minutes later, they saw a huge humpback whale whose behavior was clearly abnormal. Instead of the smooth, graceful movements characteristic of these marine giants, the whale moved in jerks as if something was hindering it. Its breathing seemed rapid and interrupted. Sarah immediately contacted James, and the divers interrupted their usual work and cautiously headed towards the whale's location. They understood that approaching a potentially injured animal of such size was extremely dangerous. Meanwhile, on board the vessel, Rachel began preparing rescue equipment: special knives for cutting ropes, high-powered underwater flashlights, and safety lines. Thomas contacted the Coast Guard to report the situation and request support. As they approached the whale, their hearts stopped. Before them was a majestic creature entangled in a complex web of fishing nets, ropes, and chains. A massive anchor, caught in the nets, was slowly pulling the animal down. James cautiously approached the whale's head, trying to stay within its field of vision. He remembered that humpback whales have excellent peripheral vision, and it was important for the animal to see his approach. Mike stayed slightly behind, ready to assist at any moment. When their eyes met, James felt a chill run down his spine. In the whale's enormous eyes, there was not only pain, but also a clear plea for help. The animal slightly turned its head, as if trying to get a better look at the strange creature before it. James slowly raised his hand, showing the whale his empty palm. This was an intuitive gesture he used when working with dolphins. To his surprise, the whale only slightly moved its fins to maintain its position in the water. After 20 minutes, the second team of divers, Sarah and Rachel, arrived. With additional equipment, they began methodically photographing the entangled gear to better understand the structure of this deadly trap. Thomas, who remained on board with the captain, coordinated the team's actions and maintained communication with the approaching Coast Guard vessel. He also began compiling a detailed report of the events, recording each action. The first task was to identify the most dangerous parts of the entanglement and keep the whale as still as possible. Mike focused on the anchor, trying to figure out the best way to free it from the nets without disturbing the whale. The anchor weighed about 1.5 tons and needed to be detached somehow without letting it suddenly sink. Rachel methodically cut the nets around the whale's pectoral fins. This work required special care, as the ropes in these areas were particularly deeply embedded in the animal's skin. Each cut she made slowly, trying not to injure the whale's sensitive skin. Soon, the Coast Guard vessel arrived, carrying a veterinarian specializing in marine mammals and an additional rescue team. They immediately began setting up special equipment to lift heavy objects. The veterinarian, Dr. Emily Parker, descended underwater to assess the whale's condition. She discovered several deep wounds where the ropes had particularly severely cut into the skin. Fortunately, none of them posed an immediate threat to the animal's life. The team quickly devised a plan. First, they needed to free the whale's head and blowhole, then gradually free the rest of its body, leaving the work with the anchor for last. Each rescuer was assigned a specific area of responsibility. The most challenging task was removing the ropes from the whale's mouth. James, as the most experienced team member, took on this task. He slowly approached the whale's head, gently speaking to it through his regulator. The whale seemed to understand James's intention. It slightly opened its mouth, allowing the human to examine the entangled gear inside. Several thick ropes were found there, which were entangled around the whale's tongue and jaw. This explained why the whale had great difficulty feeding normally. The work of removing the ropes from the mouth took almost an hour. Throughout this time, the whale remained surprisingly calm, occasionally making slight movements. Each successfully removed piece of rope brought visible relief to the animal. After completing the first stage, the team took a break to change air tanks and rest briefly on the surface. They discussed the further plan of action. It remained to free the main part of the whale's body and address the problem with the anchor. The water temperature began to rise, making the work slightly more comfortable. After the break, Sarah and Rachel continued methodically cutting the nets around the whale. They used special knives with rounded tips to avoid accidentally injuring the animal. Each cut required extreme concentration and precision. Mike and 2 rescuers from the Coast Guard vessel prepared to lift the anchor. They secured special inflatable pontoons to it, which were supposed to help control its descent to the bottom after being detached from the nets. Another hour later, most of the nets had been removed from the whale's body. The wounds left after removal looked inflamed but not critical. Dr. Parker periodically checked the animal's condition, noting that its breathing had become more even and calm. The most dramatic moment was detaching the anchor. The team spent almost an hour preparing for this operation. Inflatable pontoons were installed and safety lines were secured. It remained to cut the last ropes connecting the anchor to the whale. At the right moment, James gave the signal, and everyone took their positions. Mike began slowly cutting the last ropes, while the others controlled the anchor's position. The whale, as if sensing the importance of the moment, remained practically motionless. When the last rope was cut, the team held their breath, watching as the massive structure gradually disappeared into the depths of the ocean. As soon as the anchor was detached, the whale's behavior noticeably changed. For the first time in many hours, it could move freely. Its first movements were cautious, as if it were learning to swim again. Gradually, its movements became more confident and graceful. The next half hour, the team spent observing the whale and documenting its condition. The animal began to make smooth circles around the rescuers, with each circle moving more freely and naturally. Its breathing fully normalized, and then, surprisingly, the whale unexpectedly approached James and very gently touched him with its enormous body. This gesture was so tender and delicate that it seemed almost unreal. Everything happened in just a few seconds, but this moment was forever imprinted in the memory of all present. After this, the whale began to perform a series of graceful movements resembling figure eights. It moved with amazing agility, as if dancing in the water, creating small vortices resembling underwater tornadoes. Sarah managed to capture these movements on camera, realizing that such footage was a great rarity. The team began to gradually move away from the whale, giving it more space to move. They carefully watched as the animal explored its newly regained freedom. From a distance, Sarah noted that despite the numerous wounds and scratches, the whale's overall condition could be assessed as satisfactory. Most of the injuries should heal naturally over several weeks. Then the whale unexpectedly surfaced and released a powerful jet of water from its blowhole. This spout was much stronger than usual, as if the animal was demonstrating its joy and relief. Drops of water, illuminated by the setting sun, created a small rainbow in the air. Over the next 15 minutes, the team watched as the whale performed a series of impressive jumps. Each time its enormous body appeared above the water's surface, everyone on board both vessels was awestruck. The splashes of water scattered for dozens of meters around. Thomas, who continued to observe the animal, noted that whales usually try to leave the scene of such a stressful event as quickly as possible, but this whale seemed to want to demonstrate its gratitude. After this, the whale slowly swam past the side of the vessel, allowing all team members to get a good look at it in the rays of the setting sun. Its wet skin shimmered in all shades of gray and blue. Rachel noticed that some of the scars on the whale's body were old, possibly from previous encounters with fishing gear. This observation once again underscored the importance of their work that day and the need for a more responsible approach to the disposal of fishing gear. By evening, the whale began to slowly move northward. Its movements were confident and purposeful. The team assumed it was heading towards rich fishing grounds where large groups of humpback whales usually gather for summer feeding at this time of year. The sunset painted the ocean in golden hues as the team began to collect their equipment. James checked the coordinates one last time to accurately record the location of this amazing rescue. The captain marked this point on his navigational charts. In the evening, already on their way back to shore, the team conducted a detailed review of the operation. They analyzed each stage of the rescue, noting the most effective techniques and methods. Special attention was paid to how important it was to remain calm and act methodically despite the stressful situation. Sarah spent several hours processing the collected photo and video materials. The quality of the footage exceeded all expectations. Clear water and good lighting allowed each stage of the rescue operation to be captured in the smallest details. Mike prepared a detailed analysis of the found fishing gear. Based on the markings on the nets and anchor, it was determined that they belonged to a fishing vessel that had sunk in this area several months earlier during a storm. A week after the rescue, a report came from a scientific research vessel working a few miles north about the sighting of a humpback whale with characteristic scars. Its behavior was absolutely normal. It was feeding and interacting with other whales. The story of this rescue quickly spread in the professional community. Many specialists noted the exceptional complexity of the team's work and the unique behavior of the whale, which demonstrated its gratitude and understanding. This case became not just a successful rescue operation, but also an amazing example of how two completely different species can interact and understand each other in a critical situation. Subsequently, the coordinates of this location were added to the database of marine rescue services as a point of increased attention. Regular patrols began to check this area more frequently for the presence of abandoned fishing gear. The data collected during the operation also helped improve the methodology for rescuing large marine mammals. Particularly valuable were the observations of the whale's behavior during work with the entangled gear in its mouth. This story became a vivid example of how professionalism, patience, and the right approach can lead to the successful resolution of even the most complex situations. In the ocean, each team member took something important from this experience, and although much time has passed, all participants in that rescue operation still remember the whale's gaze with special trepidation, the gaze of an intelligent being aware of what is happening and capable of feeling gratitude towards its rescuers.